you spent 4 years at the FDA. So walk us through the FDA approval process.
So for brand name products, whether it's a traditional small molecule pharmaceutical or a biologic therapeutic, the process is fairly similar. So it starts with what's called preclinical testing, and that means testing in animals. So when you have a wholly new drug, you want to test it in animals first to make sure you have enough safety data, enough data about the toxicity of the drug to feel comfortable trying it out in humans for the first time. And FDA typically expects testing in 2 different species, and this animal preclinical testing typically takes 1 to 3 years. So after the animal testing, companies will generally meet with the FDA in what's called a pre-IND meeting. IND stands for Investigational New Drug Application. And one thing to mention is that throughout this process, there's a lot of meeting between the companies and the FDA. So it isn't this entirely black box process where companies give information to FDA and just wait and have no idea what FDA is thinking. There's a lot of back and forth throughout the process. So there's this pre-IND meeting, and then the company will submit an IND to the FDA. So the IND generally describes the animal data and any other data the company has to support testing the product in humans. Once the IND is in effect, the company moves forward with clinical trials. In order to start studying drugs in humans, companies have to submit an IND, an Investigational New Drug Application, and before they do that, they meet with FDA. And I should say throughout the process, there are lots of meetings with FDA, so this isn't a drug company submits information, there's a black box while they're waiting for FDA to respond. There's a lot of back and forth. So the Investigational New Drug Application contains information about the animal testing. It contains all of the information the company thinks supports moving to test the new drug in humans. And the company will talk with FDA about how to design its trials in humans so that the trials will be set up to eventually support the safety and efficacy of the product for approval. And clinical trials will proceed in 3 phases. Phase 1 is first time in humans, typically very small, 20 to 80 subjects. Phase 2 is developing more safety information and very basic efficacy information about the drug or biologic. And phase 3 are the largest sets of trials. They're sometimes called the pivotal trials, and those are the large trials in maybe thousands of patients that are intended to show that the product actually works. So once we've gone through these clinical trials,
and how long is there a typical period for the clinical trials? Can you average the years for those? And does it differ for biologics?
So, estimates about how long this differs. I think generally folks think it takes 5 to 7 years to complete clinical trials in humans, all 3 phases. I don't think there's a significant difference in time length for the large molecule drugs and the large molecule biologics and the small molecule conventional pharmaceuticals. But it's a lot of time either way.
Yeah.
So once these 5 to 7 years have passed and the clinical trial process is finished, a company would submit either a new drug application, that's the kind of application for a conventional small molecule pharmaceutical, or a biologics license application, that's the kind of application for a biologic drug. And generally, again, there will also be meetings with FDA before the submission of the application to talk about what should be in the application, where things stand.
Could I interrupt and ask Sarah to talk about the clinical trial process? When do reporters typically become aware that there's a promising new drug in the pipeline, and how do you go about covering it?
I think one of the things that's important to understand is FDA is very limited in what they can say about products as they're going through the clinical trials process. Pretty much it's all proprietary information. So you'll have to rely on the company to get that information, and many companies will put out press releases. Even before they do phase 1 trials, they'll put out press releases about phase 1 results, phase 2, phase 3. So I think it's as important as a reporter just to understand that a lot of drugs that look promising in animal testing may not succeed in later trials. Drugs that even succeed in phase 2 may not succeed in phase 3, whether it's new safety information that comes out in a bigger population and so forth. So because you can't really rely on the FDA to help you understand maybe the quality of the data, it's important to look to academics or biostatisticians who can help you parse out the PR language a company might use to understand if there's how good the drug looks based on the data they release. And oftentimes you're not going to get full data sets, so it can be really important just to have that understanding of, did it meet its endpoints, and does statistical significance in this drug product really mean it's going to be a big breakthrough for patients or not?